Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I have a really exciting video for all of you. Today we're doing another comic book run comparison video. So a little over a year ago now, I did do a dedicated video comparing the Batman runs of Scott Snyder, Tom King, and James Tynion IV. Candidly, it was a bit of an experimental video for me, but over the year, a lot of people seem to like it. In fact, I've had requests to do another comic book run comparison video or two, and honestly, I thought it was about time. So for today, we're going to be looking at my favorite comic book character of all time. That's right, we're talking Daredevil. And for runs I'm comparing today, I thought I'd go ahead and talk about some of my personal favorites, and those are the runs by Frank Miller, Brian Michael Bendis, Mark Waid, and Chip Zdarsky. I can't wait to get started today, but before we dive into the content of the video, I just want to shout out the channel sponsor, Panel Bound Comics. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link to them in the video's description, and if you see anything on that site you like, you can use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you for considering. Now let's get started with today's Daredevil video. Now before we compare these comic book runs, I did want to issue a brief spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the different runs on Daredevil here, and I will be commenting on plot points. You've been advised. Okay, to kick off this run comparison video for the incredible Daredevil, we're going to be looking at the run by Frank Miller. For many, this is considered the quintessential and best Daredevil comic run of all time, and it's hard to argue with. Honestly, it's on my short list as well. Through the late 70s and early 80s, Frank Miller just dominated in this title. His main run with Klaus Janson is collected across this omnibus here. And then when Miller returned and created The Man Without Fear and Born Again and things like that, that work is all collected in the Daredevil Companion Omnibus, which you'll see momentarily as well. But as I talk about these two volumes that really do sum up Miller's time on the book, I just want to stress a couple things about Miller's run that are really unique and honestly foundational for the character moving forward. While this character was created back in the Silver Age by Stan Lee and team, Frank Miller really helped modernize Daredevil for the time period he wrote him in. He added a lot of sophistication and layering to the character, he updated the origin story, and he really pushed for these kind of noir, crime, gritty elements that, while present in Daredevil prior to this, really came home during Miller's tenure. Miller also really added spokes to the wheel, so to speak, for the Daredevil mythos. He really centralized Kingpin as his main arch rival. Before this point, he was largely a Spider-Man villain, and by this point in Miller's run, he just really grabbed Kingpin and brought him in. We also have the introduction of the character of Elektra, which was created by Frank Miller, this kind of woman he meets at college, kind of falls in love with, but then ultimately after she loses her father, she gets training and becomes this deadly ninja assassin. She's an ally, she's an enemy, she's a love interest, she's just this chaotic mix of everything, an incredible cornerstone for the Daredevil universe. That all happens here, along with the introduction of the Hand, the kind of evil clan of ninjas, of course. They're recurrent villains not only through Daredevil, but the larger Marvel universe after this point. All of that happened during this time. We're also introduced to the character of Stick, who was also created during Miller's time on Daredevil, who became this kind of trainer for Matt Murdock around the time he lost his sight. This is an added nuance of his origin story that I really felt filled out this world and just kind of made everything gel a little bit more. The art from Janson throughout a lot of the Daredevil run here, I also just really loved. There's something very cinematic and kind of storyboardy about the way they break down art, and I really just appreciate it. Janson's work, his stuff here is just incredible work. The use of shadow and almost kind of texturing, everything just, wow, I really loved it. And honestly, for the time period this was created in, I think it was really ahead of its time. A really immersive run as well. A real standout about Frank Miller's run for me personally is just that I think that this became a benchmark for Daredevil by which I evaluate all modern Daredevil runs. What do I mean by that? Again, Daredevil existed before the Frank Miller run, but so much of his just general mythology was crafted into the Miller run, adding things like Elektra, the Hand, how he came up with Stick, and all of that, bringing Kingpin more into the fold for the Daredevil universe. All of these things, again, are just kind of essential and baked into the Daredevil world at this point. Again, kind of upping the volume on those noir crime elements. Again, all of that I see throughout Miller's run, and now that's become kind of the benchmark or basis for a lot of modern Daredevil storytelling. And I can trace a lot of that back here to Miller in the pages of this work. I also think Miller largely elevated the character of Daredevil. I think that he had a lot more mainstream appeal after this point. I think a lot of the people came to the table to see what Miller had done or had heard about what he had did on the book. And after that, I think it just really bred a whole generation or several generations of Daredevil fans after that. There's so many like homages and things that are done today in modern Daredevil storytelling that I could really just pull all the way back to what happened here in Miller's run. As I transition to this companion omnibus, I just want to say not only did he do an incredible run on that's just proper Daredevil title, but he actually returned to do, in my mind, some of my favorite Daredevil work from him in particular. We have the story Born Again, where Kingpin discovers his identity after it's sold to him, sort of by Karen Page, and then Kingpin just goes to completely destroy and dismantle Matt Murdock's life. Again, an incredible Daredevil story. We also have Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. I love this. This is Daredevil Year One. This is the retelling of the origin story. It's a mini-series with art from John Romita Jr., and it is exceptional. Again, some of my favorite Miller work is actually in this omnibus here, but I love it. I think that the kind of psychological depths we get to go to with Matt Murdock and with Daredevil and his supporting cast throughout this run, again, it just raises the bar on all Daredevil storytelling from this point onward. I also think a lot of these stories hold up against the test of time. There's a reason this is considered a classic. Amazing throughout, absolutely. When I think about Daredevil by Frank Miller, I think primarily of Elektra. I think of Bullseye killing Elektra. I think of Kingpin burning Matt Murdock's life to the ground, and I think of that retelling of the origin in The Man Without Fear. Again, I have become a lifelong Daredevil fan at this point, and Frank Miller is just such an important part of that fandom for me. I can't imagine Daredevil without Frank Miller. I can't imagine what this property would be, if it would even still be around, if he didn't get on the book and did everything he did with this run. So when I'm thinking about talking about different comparisons and runs, I had to give props for the man that I believe completely revolutionized and again just set the precedent for all modern Daredevil storytelling. The great Mr. Frank Miller. Next up, as I start comparing these Daredevil runs, I want to talk about my favorite Daredevil comic run, nay, my favorite comic book run I've ever had the pleasure of reading. To do that, of course, we're going to be talking about Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev. This is during the Marvel Knights era of Marvel Comics, or maybe the tail end of Marvel Knights. It's a little unclear for me. We start this run with a storyline from Bendis with art by David Mack, a really beautiful kind of painted Daredevil story. And then after that, we jump into the proper run, again with Bendis and Maleev. I really, really love this run, obviously. I just said it was my favorite of all time, and you might be asking why, and what makes this such a standout Daredevil run. I think ultimately, when it comes right down to it, why I would distill this as my favorite Daredevil run is that this perfectly incorporated the detective-y, criminal kind of fiction elements to Daredevil that I had been longing for. Yes, I saw some of it with Miller and in other runs, but really it's in the hands of Bendis that we get the crime fiction aspects of Daredevil all the way up, highest possible volume. You feel like you are reading a crime story with a kind of shading of spandex over the top. Yes, he's a superhero, but he's really a street level vigilante who's also a lawyer and who also has just a fundamentally flawed personal life. He's trying to do what he can as everything around him just pressures mount account, relationships crumble, and his whole life and sequence of identities just start to unravel at the seams. And we have all of that explored in the pages of this run by Bendis. I really love the kind of setup for the crime element in Bendis's Daredevil world as well. There's a lot of interest paid toward the Kingpin and who might try to subvert the Kingpin to become kind of top dog for the criminal empire within New York. We have Daredevil completely defeat the Kingpin at one point around midway through the run, and he essentially names himself the Kingpin if he's needed to be, just so he can kind of have his territory safe from this kind of criminal scum. We do have Daredevil, again, just kind of unraveling though. We have him outed in the papers. Matt Murdock is Daredevil. He kind of countersues and tries to deny that that is who he is, and this obviously upsets a lot of those close to him who do know who he is and his double identity for a fact. We also have questions of his integrity with all of this happening and the amounts of violence he's willing to go to try to keep people safe, or even just deal with his own personal trauma in many cases. The art we have from Maleev throughout this run as well is so gritty and so dark, and it's not just because all the pages have kind of a black bordering around them, it's just the scratchiness of the art. There's a texture to it, there's a richness here that it doesn't feel light, it feels dismal and world beaten and weathered, and I just love it. It sells the storytelling, and everything works just so well in conjunction with each other. I think the storytellers, both Maleev and Bendis of course, just weave this rich character tapestry for all of us to just check out. As we transition to the back half of the Bendis run, I again just want to say what sets apart Bendis for me is just he creates Daredevil as a crime fiction character. Really, I feel like if you just remove the superhero elements, which are few and far between, you're just reading a crime story, and it's so dialed in from Bendis's already prestigious history in that subgenre of fiction. The way he weaves that just so seamlessly into the world of Marvel here in Daredevil is just a masterstroke. We also have a great supporting cast of characters like Foggy. We have Black Widow show back up, which has huge ties to Daredevil's past as well. We have an introduction of a new love interest in Mila Donovan. We even have Elektra show up. We get to see how he handles or mishandles a lot of the relationships in his life. Again, we have him trying to figure out who he is or what he stands for or how he can kind of stay above water, so to speak. And again, everything just begins to crumble around him in a just ever-increasing cycle of violence. Again, violence is maybe not an end in its own right, but when used to just kind of convey the psychological degradation of our main hero, I just think it was so richly done. I just don't know a better way to say this. This is a deep psychological drama, crime thriller that also just incidentally happens to be about a vigilante superhero. I really liked it for that. I like that you can read this kind of independently of the rest of the Marvel Universe as well. It's pretty great for new readers, although it does reward longer-term fans of Daredevil. If Miller kind of rebirthed and reestablished the hero for a modern era, I think Bendis and Maleev perfected that era. For me, having those undertones of crime fiction and just deep psychological trauma just really enriched the storytelling here and catapulted Daredevil to my favorite comic book character of all time. If you're looking for an amazing superhero comic book run, look no further than my personal choice for best Daredevil run of all time, Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev. Next up for our Daredevil run comparison, I'm going to be talking about another one of my favorite comic book runs here. This is Daredevil by Mark Waid. What I think is so impressive about Waid's run, in the other two runs I've talked about so far, we really emphasize kind of the darker, grittier aspects of the Daredevil universe, but what I love here is that this embraced the earliest roots of the Daredevil character from the Silver Age, which brought in that kind of swashbuckling levity to the character. But what I like about this one is that it's not just levity for levity's sake. It's almost how the character of Matt Murdock is trying to deal with a lot of the mounting drama and tragedies within his own life. He is choosing to kind of cast aside depressive thoughts for the sake of trying to hold on to just something lighter, something good, something just more wholesome, brighter. And you could see that reflected across all of the art throughout this entire run. Mark Waid's run comes after Bendis, comes after Brubaker, and comes after the Diggle run, which culminated in the Shadowland event, where arguably Daredevil reaches the darkest point of his life. And we, after that, have this palate cleanser of a run that, again, it's lighter and brighter, not only tonally, but also in the art. This is not a gritty Daredevil. This is a squeaky, vibrant, wonderfully layered Daredevil. It looks deceptively soft up top, but we get a lot of psychological layers underneath, and I think that that is something that Waid navigates so beautifully throughout the run. Waid is not only having Daredevil trying to have a new lease on life, Matt Murdock under Waid is kind of trying to have tongue-in-cheek humor about the fact that a lot of people know that he's Daredevil. We have him, again, just trying to cast off these things that weigh him down. And while he struggles with that at a couple notable points throughout this run, he is largely able to embrace that kind of softer, lighter touch in life. And I really liked that. I think I was kind of apt not to enjoy that just because my favorite personal flavor of Daredevil is that gritty crime fighter, kind of dark, edgy street vigilante kind of aspect of Daredevil. But I have to admit, the swashbuckling levity of this incarnation of Daredevil really just worked for me, especially because it didn't throw out that psychological, tormented kind of character. It just had him trying to have a thin veneer of hope the best he could. And as we see that mask or that hope kind of crumble or waver by the end, I just really love the way this character grappled with all of that throughout Waid's run. Waid was also blessed with a number of really gifted artists. One of my favorites across his run was Chris Samney, of course. Again, all of the artists, though, that are attached to this period really have that kind of softer, lighter, brighter, vibrant feel to their art. There's kind of heavier outlines that feels kind of cartoony or animated. And again, all of that serves the overall tone and feel for this run really perfectly. It also added, in my mind, for the first time I had seen it at least, the way that Daredevil sees the world. It almost has blacked out characters with sort of like radared sound waves or lines to it. I really love how Waid and these artists kind of depicted the way Daredevil's abilities work based off of sonar and things like that. I liked it. I think visually it is really unique, and it absolutely makes a kind of internal sense, I guess, as a reader, and I just really enjoyed it. This run was larger than life and fun. It also paired him up with a lot of just really fantastical villains. We don't have just kind of gritty, off the street realism kind of characters. We have characters like Stiltman and people with magic powers and all sorts of things like that. And to see Daredevil cross paths with them, again, it just really worked for me. This run was a huge departure from so much of what came before, and the fact that it hits for me, I just think is something that speaks volumes about the crafting experience of people like Mark Waid and everyone else involved with the book. And speaking of book or books, this run is collected across 2 omnibus editions. This is the volume 2. Something else about this run I want to talk about is while things are lighter and brighter, we still have the character dealing with some really heavy things, primarily the cancer battle of his best friend, Foggy Nelson. And within this brighter context of life, you still have a lot of the heartbreak and a lot of the heaviness of just the day in, day outs of life. And I think that how Waid handles that so adeptly, again, is just a real strong point for this run. We also have him returning to San Francisco, which is a place that his character went to once upon a time. This really takes him out of his element. He's not in Hell's Kitchen. He has to learn a new city and how it moves and breathes and feels and all of that. And I liked that. I liked that we had kind of a fish out of water story for part of this run. We're introduced to the love interest, Kirsten McDuffie, which honestly is one of my favorite love interests for Matt Murdock. She's another lawyer or somewhere involved in the criminal justice system, and that she's just so competent and leadership driven, and I just really liked her character. I thought the dynamic with Matt Murdock was near perfect, and I really liked her inclusion throughout the run as a whole. While Matt Murdock is always a flawed character, the way he chooses to hold on to hope throughout this run, even when it's tested and tried, and sometimes wavers, ultimately leads this run to have such a satisfying and optimistic resolution that I was left just smiling ear to ear by the time I had finished this run. I think in a modern Daredevil landscape that's saturated with the dark, abysmal grittiness of it all, to have something that's so expertly written that just kind of tries to hold on to the lighter side of things was such a fun and refreshing change of pace. This is definitely another high bar in the modern Daredevil canon, at least in my mind, and it's one I return to and think about quite often. Another fantastic Daredevil run for your consideration, Daredevil by Mark Waid. And the final run we'll be talking about today for our comparison video for Daredevil runs, we're going to be talking about the recent run by Chip Zdarsky and Marco Checchetto. This is one of the most relevant and most modern Daredevil runs to date. In fact, I think there's only been one creator team after this, if I'm not mistaken, at the time of the recording. A lot of people really spoke positively about the Zdarsky run, and because it is one of the most modern runs, I thought that this would be a great addition to the list. Now, I am a huge Zdarsky fan in general, and obviously, as you've already heard, I'm a massive Daredevil fan. I really love this run quite a bit, but it does have some highs and lows for me. As far as how it compares to these other runs, though, I can't wait to talk about right now. So like everything established post Frank Miller, this really does lean into these kind of criminal, crime-fighting, street-level, noir-ish kind of bents. Again, Mark Waid was kind of a brief, light exception to this rule, maybe, but Zdarsky's definitely full-on back in it. Paired up with Marco Checchetto, who just really has such a vivid and gorgeous look at the Daredevil world. I just really like what these two creators brought to the table. Now, the Zdarsky Daredevil run begins with him recovering from a life-threatening injury. We have him kind of off balance, out of sorts, but he's taken up the horned heads of Daredevil, and he's back on the streets trying to do what he can. Well, he misses a beat and inadvertently kills one of the criminals he's trying to stop, and that leads to a downward internal spiral that is really navigated for most of the rest of this run. The way it was handled, though, I thought was just really expertly done. As you know, as I've discussed in this video, my favorite flavor of Daredevil is that kind of gritty, tormented, conflicted character that happens to be in a really kind of crime narrative sort of arc, and that's what we have, particularly in the first half of this run by Chip Zdarsky. We have him teaming up with characters like the Punisher, Luke Cage, and some of the other Marvel street-level heroes. We have him trying to dodge the police that are trying to hunt him down. We have him navigating what he stands for now. He gets confronted by his friend and ally Spider-Man, who basically says, "You're done. You're not keeping the right caliber of crime fighting, and you're kind of a mess. You need to stand down." Daredevil chooses to move forward anyway, but ultimately he can't outrun this feeling that things are starting to unravel. As we progress through the run, we have him submitting himself for justice, and he's incarcerated for a period within this run. In his place, we have Elektra Natchios, who basically disavows her killing policy for the sake of taking up the mantle of Daredevil, this time as the Woman Without Fear. She's kind of defending Hell's Kitchen in Matt Murdock's stead on the streets there, but in the background we have kind of tension mounting as Kingpin is still mayor of New York, and he's ultimately making his game plan, and everything really culminates for this first half with the Devil's Reign event, where it's basically Daredevil and the kind of street level Marvel heroes versus Mayor Fisk. Really enjoyed this. This really brought a lot kind of back to the fold as far as Daredevil versus Kingpin stories. We have Matt Murdock out of jail and just trying to defend Hell's Kitchen. This ultimately culminates in that second omnibus of this 2-volume omnibus set, and afterward we do have a new issue 1 and the later portion of the Zdarsky Checchetto run, where we basically have Daredevil, Matt Murdock, and Elektra Natchios kind of trying to save the world. This is the Red Fist saga. This is where we start leaning into the more spiritual, mystical sides of the Daredevil mythos. This is personally not my favorite flavor of Daredevil, and I think that this is the softest part of the run for me. We have him kind of battling more mystical forces. We have things like the Hand and other things at play here, and we have Daredevil kind of creating his own school to try to reform criminals and fight back the darkness. Again, still a fun run here, but a little bit different than I really hoped for. Some positives about this run, though, is that you get kind of both sides of the Daredevil coin. You have that gritty, kind of crime-driven narrative, and that really feels realistic and rooted, and then you have the more fantastical, mystical, hand ninjas side of the Daredevil storytelling, and I like that you kind of have both sides of that coin represented in this run. The fact that we also have art from the incredible Checchetto throughout most of this run as well really just kicks this run into another sphere of excellence for me. I love Zdarsky. I think he can really handle this kind of gritty, crime-driven kind of storytelling. It really works for me. Zdarsky is a writer that has just tremendous range, and to see him on my favorite character was a real dream. While I do think the front half of this run was probably my favorite and inspired by some of the greats that came before, like Frank Miller, like Bendis, I still think that Zdarsky had a lot to say for this character, and I appreciated what he did to evolve the character of Elektra Natchios into her own version of Daredevil in her own right. I also like like that we had more interplay between those two characters. I like the inclusion of this new police character that seemed really layered and interesting as well, Detective North, and overall, yeah, just a really fun run. While this run didn't have the levity or swashbuckling aspects that Waid brought to the table, I do think that it really tried to hone in on the psychological nuances that I see present in a lot of all of these other runs. I think that this really honored the voice of the Matt Murdock character, especially before we got to the Red Fist saga at the end that I just mentioned. And yeah, I just really liked it. I liked that we had most of it set in Hell's Kitchen. I love that we had a lot of interactions with a lot of the Daredevil mainstays. I really liked the action sequences. I thought the art, again, was just really, really sharp and beautiful and vivid. The run was just really layered, and I just liked it. For all those reasons and more, I think that this is one of the better modern Daredevil runs, and honestly, in recent history, probably my favorite. If you're interested, don't miss out on this modern marvel, Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky and Marco Checchetto. As we bring this run comparison video to a close, I hope you've enjoyed these brief overviews of Frank Miller, Brian Michael Bendis, Mark Waid, and Chip Zdarsky's runs on The Man Without Fear here. I really love the character of Daredevil. Across all of these runs, I can make an argument that why they stand out as great to me is that they really emphasize what makes this character amazing, which is this deeply conflicted character, a character made of oppositions. He's a devout Catholic who is also dressed like a devil. He's someone who defends law and order in the courtroom and then defies the rule of law in the streets as a vigilante. He's constantly in these loving relationships, and yet he sabotages them and thinks about himself in many ways. I just love the contrast. I love the conflicts. I love that this is a character that is seemingly always kind of tormented or at odds with himself, always battling himself as largely the worst enemy at all times. And I think because of that, there's so many ripe opportunities for conflicts and great story elements. I think all of these runs demonstrate a tremendous set of character-driven stories and narratives. The fact that we also have them paired with amazing visual artists make all four of these runs absolute standouts for me. Starting with Frank Miller's just complete revolutionizing of the character, adding elements like the Hand, Elektra, and just those noir aspects to the forefront, going into things like Bendis, which just brought the crime fiction aspects to the peak pinnacle of everything they can be in my mind, following through to the Waid run, which in my mind is the most surprising as we switch tones but still retain so much of what makes this character a landmark Marvel hero. And then finally, the Zdarsky run. Again, a very modern piece here. I love that this harkened back to a lot of those kind of street-level crime stories like from Miller and Bendis and Brubaker and all these other runs, but also kind of evolved it, let it tell a modern kind of crime story while also still adding that kind of mystical element and side of Daredevil's nature. I really thought that that was a really well-rounded treat. Daredevil is the man without fear, and my superhero comic hero without equal. In the comments, please let me know if you've read any of these Daredevil runs, what you feel about them, what you thought should have been on this comparison video list, what you thought about this in general. Would you like to see more videos comparing different comic book runs? Let me know all of that and more in the comment section. Again, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, those comments we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks everyone, bye.